An Iranian news agency says several people have been killed during escalating clashes between protesters and security forces in the west of the country. This comes a day after a volunteer member of the Revolutionary Guard was reported killed. This social media footage shows some of the latest demonstrations, which have now entered a fifth day. What began as protests over runaway inflation has quickly turned into a larger show of anger against the country's authoritarian regime. Well, for more on this, we can speak now with Siba Shakib. She's a filmmaker, writer, and political activist. Siba, there are reports of several people killed in clashes with security forces. What more have you been hearing from people in Iran?
Hello, Terry. Thank you for having me. I've been on the phone with family members and friends, and they say that you can look at it in two different ways. One is it's high time for something like this to happen again after the last big rise up was 2022, when young Mahsa Amini was killed by the regime. And others say for as long as they have the weapons and the means, they are not going anywhere.
The protesters have been seen chanting slogans like "Death to Khamenei." What is this public defiance in Iran? Tell us.
Well, death to Khamenei, death to Khomeini when he was still alive, death to the mullah, death to the regime are slogans that we've been hearing since day one, since 46 years. And the situation is changing every year, every day, every week. The situation is changing, and people are fighting for more liberation, and they do succeed getting more liberation, but still the regime is very, very strongly in power.
U.S. President Donald Trump, I'm sure you've seen this, he's issued a rather striking statement on Truth Social. He says, if Iran shoots and violently kills peaceful protesters, which is their custom, the United States of America will come to their rescue. What do you make of that?
Not only that, Netanyahu has publicly addressed the population in Iran, and they have also spread the message in Persian that we have people on the ground, we have forces on the ground, and we will help you if you rise up. And but the Iranian population is traumatized by help from outside. Since 100 years and longer, the Brits, the US, and other foreign countries have tried to change the situation in Iran. And each time it was not for the benefit of the population, and the situation has become very, very bad for the population. So the population does not really ask for help from other countries, from other governments. They only ask for other countries and governments not to support the regime, which is very important and vital. Otherwise, the population in Iran and outside Iran has the power and the strength and the means to deal with the government themselves.
A top Iranian official has said that U.S. intervention in Iran could destabilize the entire region. Are you concerned about that possibility?
To be honest with you, the region is destabilized already. I don't see a stabilized region now. It can only get better or worse, but it's not a stable situation. And I don't think that the fall of the regime in Iran will be a negative move or a negative fact for the region, but a positive. We all remember and know what Iran did in the region, supporting Assad, supporting other groups and terrorist groups in the region. So I think any change would be positive as soon as the mullah regime is toppled.
Siba, thank you very much for your insights. That was Siba Shakib, filmmaker, writer, and political activist.
Thank you very much.
Now let's bring in Scott Lucas. He's Professor of American Studies at University College Dublin and joins us now from there. Now, what do you make of Trump's threat there to Iran? He also said, quote, "We are locked and loaded and ready to go."
It's Trump being Trump. He's used that same expression, locked and loaded, when he threatened North Korea before he decided Kim Jong-un was his best friend in his first term. He's made that expression locked and loaded before when threatening Iran, including during Israel's 12-day war in June. Donald Trump doesn't know that much about Iran, and Donald Trump has a propensity to go on Truth Social late at night and post about things that he really has little information on. So what is important here? The question here is that not that the U.S. is going to use military intervention if Iran does kill these protesters. That was the situation that we faced in 2009 when millions of Iranians challenged what were probably fraudulent elections, rigged elections, and when scores of them were killed by security forces. It's the situation we faced in 2022 with the Women Life Freedom protest, when Iranians challenged the repression of women, including the killing of Mahsa Amini in detention. And here we are again. The fundamental is that change, if it is going to come, cannot be imposed on Iran from the outside for reasons I can go into. It has to come from inside. So the focus, I would hope, of the media is actually going to be on those demands for reforms and justice, as well as the complaints over the economic situations. And what are the possibilities here? Is there the possibility for peaceful reform, or are we going to go into an escalating confrontation with a regime which feels threatened?
Now, the US have made it very clear in the past that they would prefer that regime change in Tehran. But what would be the end game then for the US, and how could they help bring regime change about?
Well, I'm just going to repeat this. The moment that the U.S. government goes in and tells Iranians, we're going to change your regime, is the moment that a genuine protest movement is in serious trouble. Because the first thing the Iranian regime will do is they will use that to say that the protesters are being backed by the United States and indeed by Israel. They'll use that to tarnish them and delegitimize them. And some Iranians will swing behind the regime if it appears that the U.S. is trying to get involved, especially with force. Probably the best approach, I would say this as an analyst, but also as someone who has many friends in Iran, is that you encourage that call for peaceful reform, for women's rights, for economic rights, for social rights, that you go ahead and pay attention to the peaceful protest. But when you get to the position of violence in the streets, you have to be very, very careful not to be seen endorsing violence against the regime, because you will give them the pretext to strike back and strike back hard.
Now, when we talk about endgames here, there have also been demands by the protesters to return for the return of the Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi. Is that an option, a realistic one?
I think what we have to say here is there's a widespread of opinion within Iran in terms of where we go next. There are some people who would like to see the overthrow, the removal of the regime, and they express good reasons for that. But there are many others who say, no, if you just overthrow the regime at this point, you create a vacuum of power, you create instability, you run the risk, as we've seen in other countries in recent years of violence and instability. So they'll call for reforms, and they'll call for reforms through peaceful measures. There are some people who do support the return of Reza Pahlavi in Iran, but that number of people in Iran is uncertain. It tends to get magnified by the Iranian diaspora, many of whom are diehard supporters of Reza Pahlavi. And of course, on our social media, we usually hear the voices of the diaspora more than we do of those inside Iran. So calling for his return to the throne, especially given the record of his late father, the Shah, that's something we must be very cautious about.
Scott Lucas, Professor of American Studies at University College Dublin. Thank you very much for sharing your expertise with us.
Thank you very much. Happy New Year.
Now let's bring in Mahmood Amiry-Moghaddam. He's the director of the Norwegian NGO Iran Human Rights and joins us now from Oslo. Now, there are reports of several people killed in clashes with the security forces. Do you see this as the start of a heavier-handed state response to the demonstrations?
Good morning. So according to our analysis, so far between 6 and 7 people have been killed, and then hundreds have been wounded, and the protests are spreading to many cities. Now, so far, I think it has been shown in 30 cities in 7 provinces. I would say that at the present moment, the Iranian authorities are hoping that the protests will end without too much violence, but they don't have any option because, Iranian people are angry at the authorities. They have used this opportunity to once again call for a change. They are calling for a regime change, and I don't think that authorities have any other option. Either they should give up or they should use the violence. And based on what we have seen in previous protests, unfortunately, they are going to use heavier violence against protesters.
And now the president has said that he's offering protesters dialogue. Do you think the government is really ready to do that?
Well, it's not about whether they are ready or not. They have nothing to offer because the Islamic Republic is now ruled by a group of, I would say, incompetent and corrupt people who are not capable of solving people's most basic issues, daily issues. There are water shortage, electricity shortage. They cannot control the economy, and it's because the regime has put people in key positions based on their loyalty to the system, not based on their competence. So that's why they have been trying to rule the country by creating fear. Last year we had the highest number of executions in Iran in more than 35 years. So the government doesn't have anything to offer. I mean, of course, they can say, okay, choose another government or another system, but they are not going to do that.
Speaking of another government, the demonstrators have also been calling for the return of Reza Pahlavi, the son of the Iranian Shah, who was ousted in the 1979 Islamic Revolution. Is Pahlavi, who has backed these protests, gaining more public support, and is that a viable option for the future?
Well, you see, what is sure is that people don't want the Islamic Republic, that's for sure. And then, of course, compared to the Women Life Freedom protests for 3 years ago, the opposition is much more polarized. So there are parts of the society who want Pahlavi back. There are parts who don't want Pahlavi back. So that's an issue that we hope that it will be resolved somehow. But what is sure is that most people in Iran, they don't want the Islamic Republic.
Now, Iran is also currently recovering from last year's Israeli bombing and US strikes on its nuclear facilities. Keeping that in mind, how much of a problem are these fresh protests for the regime?
Well, these protests are a nightmare. That the main threat to the Islamic Republic doesn't come from Israel or the United States. It comes from angry people inside the country. So that's why they have done whatever they could to prevent protests from starting, because they know that once there are nationwide protests, it is not. It is possible that they will go out of control, and then it will lead to a regime change. So the regime is at its biggest crisis since 1979. And of course, the fact that after the war, they demonstrated that not only they are not able to protect the country, they are not able to protect themselves.
Mahmood Amiry-Moghaddam, their director of the NGO Iran Human Rights. Thank you very much for your insight.
Thank you.